The inverted coaster is a popular model that dates its origins back to the bat at Kings Island, and it got even more successful with time as the B&M invert and Intamin impulse popped up. So today I will be ranking up every coaster below the track that I've ridden. This is Zero G Coasters. I post weekly roller coaster commentary and vlogs, so if you're interested in that type of content, feel free to subscribe. If not, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Coming in at last place is a now defunct coaster, T3 at Kentucky Kingdom. This is still the only SLC I've ridden to this day, but the coonback trains make this ride very unpleasant. To sum up this ride in short, think about this thigh crushing on the Skyrush trains and multiply it times 3, and then add a rough and janky layout too. Some of the transitions are absolutely atrocious, and you will want the ride to end before the first inversion even begins. I'm happy that Kentucky Kingdom closed this ride, and I'm excited to see what goes in this plot next. At number 15 is Iron Dragon at Cedar Point, an aero suspended coaster. This is a fairly tame ride despite a 48-inch height requirement. Please fix this Cedar Point. With a few mild drops and 2 lift hills, but it spends the majority of the ride winding around a swampy area. The highlight is a few swooping turns over a pond, but they don't give off any forces whatsoever. The swinging was not very strong on either of my rides, making it feel like a glorified mine train. I would love to see this ride replaced by a family inverted coaster like Dragonflyer. Number 14 is the Bat at Kings Island, which is yet another aero suspended coaster. This ride has a great secluded setting near the old Son of Beast plot, meaning there's really nothing back there and it makes for great night rides. In fact, the walk to the ride is normally longer than the line since no one can find it. This ride has a good drop near a ravine and some intense turns high off the ground. This ride is quite short with mainly turns, but for what it has in the short time, it's a great ride. At the number 13 and 12 spots is the smaller Intamin impulses, possessed at Dorney Park in Flash Vertical Velocity at Six Flags Great America. These are very standard impulse coasters, with a very punchy launch to start off the ride, and then the forward spike. This isn't too intense since you're only going up about 1/3 of the spike, but it will be better later on. The first backwards launch thrusts you back into your seat. Do this over a few times and you have a great inverted coaster to round out the lineup. At the number 11 spot is Dragonflyer at Dollywood. This Vekoma suspended family coaster has horrible capacity since it can only run one train, and often has atrocious lines, but it is a good ride for what it is. The first drop is surprisingly intense in the back few rows, and the overbank that follows is quite whippy and has a cool visual going over the pond. The rest of the ride is filled with small dips and helixes, and the lap bar only trains allow for an open seating experience. Kicking off the top 10 is the first B&M invert on this list, Patriot at Worlds of Fun. This ride is rather short for its kind, only packing in 4 inversions, although being in the middle of the road when it comes to other stats, such as the 123-foot tall drop and 60-mile-an-hour top speed. The main reason why I rank this coaster so low is because it feels bland compared to other inverts that mix it up. They pretty much hit the copy and paste button for the first few elements, and the rest of the ride has questionable pacing, although focusing on airtime, which is an odd sensation on an invert. This ride by no means is bad though, and it serves as a supporting cast coaster in Worlds of Fun's lineup. Number 9 is a set of B&M inverts, the Batman clones. These clones are not impressive stat-wise, but they have unmatched power and intensity with the small inversions such as the 2 vertical leaps and corkscrews being a gut wrench and making me cry out on even the weaker versions of the clones, such as the one at Six Flags St. Louis. Even when the ride is not having insane inversions, the ride has some forceful turns which give off crazy positive Gs. The reason this ride is not higher is the fact that it's a short ride, but it's still an amazing coaster. Going across the pond to a Cedar Fair Park, our second defunct coaster is Wicked Twister at Cedar Point. This ride is an upscale version of the smaller impulses, but with a twisted backward spike that delivers crazy whip and weightlessness. The ride also has forceful launches like the smaller impulses, and the ride just keeps going on for a long time. Overall, this coaster had an unmatched setting near the beach of Lake Erie, and I'm really sad that this coaster is now gone. Number 7 is Great Bear at Hershey Park. This is yet another B&M inverted coaster that doesn't have the intensity of a ride like Batman, but it really shines in its uniqueness, having a helix before the first drop and diving right beside Spring Creek. The ride does have a few copy and paste elements, but they are taken at a good speed and with a good setting, so I can excuse it. The rest of the ride also has a cool corkscrew that weaves in between Super Duper Looper, and a few high-flying turns to end off the ride. Just barely missing the top 5 is Talon at Dorney Park. Talon may have the same first half as other B&M inverts with the vertical loop, Intamin, and whippy 0G roll, but the second half well enough makes up for it. Focusing on low to the ground turns and transitions, it delivers plentiful positives in all rows, and the corkscrew is a guaranteed gray out moment. The 270-degree helix also has amazing visuals near the entrance of the park, and it is genuinely scary how close you get to the ground. Combine all of it and Talon is a stunning ride. Kicking off the top 5 is Banshee at Kings Island. This is one of the tallest and fastest B&M inverts, but the vest restraints take away from the openness on the first drop. However, it still provides a great whip in the back, going straight into it instead of having a pre-drop. The ride has 2 relatively slow but visually appealing inversions, followed by a hang time filled roll. The pretzel knot is the most intense part of the ride, delivering solid positives, and the ride curves out of it into another vertical loop before the hang time filled inline twist. Many people also complain about the roughness, but I've never felt more than a slight rattle on Banshee, which doesn't bother me much. Number 4 is a small but mighty invert, Afterburn at Carowinds. This B&M coaster is on the shorter side, but the drop is still quite punchy with some intense whip. The first 3 inversions are copy-paste elements, but they are noticeably smaller than other inverts, so they are more intense. The batwing popping in the tunnel is the highlight of the ride, making blood rush to your feet and making you dizzy for at least 10 minutes after you ride. The coaster finishes off with a snappy corkscrew and a good helix before the brakes. Overall, this ride almost never lets up and it makes for a great coaster. Heading up to the point, number 3 is Raptor. This coaster has a stunning atmosphere located on the famous midway and swooping around it, and the ride itself is great too. The first drop has a curve at first before going into a straight portion, providing incredible whip and an odd airtime sensation. The coaster has 2 copy and paste inversions before the intense Cobra roll, which is very whippy and intense, and the transitions in and out of it is not uncomfortable either, unlike another coaster higher on this list. Alpengeist. The ride rides it up into a mid-course before going back down in a series of helixes and corkscrews, which makes the blood go directly to your feet and giving a gray out almost every time. Taking the silver medal is Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. This is the king of stats in terms of the B&M inverts, coming in at a 195-foot tall height and speeds of up to 72 miles an hour. The ride also has the best drop in an invert in my opinion, having unmatched whip and diving into a ravine at a 270-degree helix and a rather steep angle. The ride follows through with multiple massive inversions which are quite intense at the pullouts, including the Cobra roll which may be uncomfortable in the entrance, but it gives off insane G-forces. The ride has a weird transition into the mid-course before the finale, which contains a smooth and hang-time filled 0G rolling corkscrew before twisting into the brakes. This coaster is huge and intense, but this still isn't the best at the Busch Gardens Park because of the number 1 spot, Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa. This ride looks rather tame at first, but is anything other than that with crazy positives on the first 3 inversions, and the batwing is afterburns but more compact and amplified. The ride has an out-of-this-world second half with 2 corkscrews that dive in and out in trenches and many other intense turns. Overall, this ride is hard to describe in words, and I recommend to just go out and ride it for yourself to experience it. That about wraps up this video. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe. And comment down below your favorite inverted coaster. This is Zero G Coaster signing out. Have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next train.